Welcome back to This Is Your Mind, Applied Neuroscience for Well-Being. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Rossi. Today we're going to learn a bit about how the brain makes connections, forms memories and habits, and learns. I want to remind you that the brain is an immensely complex organ, and this is in no way a complete representation of its structure and function. We're going to discuss neurons, one of the cells of the brain, neural pathways, one of the ways that neurons connect to each other across the brain, top-down versus bottom-up processing, and introduce you to neurorestorative exercises, sometimes called mindfulness practices. There are multiple types of cells within the nervous system. Today we will focus only on neurons. Scientists believe that the average human brain has 86 billion neurons. As an introduction into this amazing cell, I will talk about 4 areas of importance. There is significantly more to this cell, but this is an introduction video, not a neuroanatomy course. The nucleus is the control center of the neuron, sometimes called the brain of the cell. Dendrites are responsible for building connections with other neurons, sending and receiving information. The axon is the conductor of electricity and relays signals from the dendrites. One of the ways that neurons connect to each other is through their dendrites sending and receiving information via an exchange of chemicals called neurotransmitters and electrical charges. They do not physically touch one another. There is a space called the synapse where these chemicals are exchanged. These neural connections are how information is transmitted, memories are stored, and learning takes place, passing information all around the brain. When we are initially learning a new piece of information, say tying our shoes, the first neural pathways that are formed are small, with weaker strength and slower processing speeds. Each time we engage in tying our shoes, this neural connection grows stronger and faster. More dendrites are formed between the sending and receiving neurons. Eventually, this neural pathway becomes so fast, so strong, that the information on how to tie our shoes becomes so ingrained we can do it seemingly without thought. This process takes place for everything we've ever learned: math, reading, driving, cooking. It forms our likes and dislikes, habits and desires, our favorite and least favorite foods, how we respond to emotions or triggering events. Each time we engage in these behaviors, thoughts, or actions, we are strengthening these neural pathways. This happens all throughout our lives. As we learned last week, when we encounter a stimulus, negative or positive, it initiates a response. This response is the cascading effect of neurons releasing neurotransmitters and electrical energy, transmitting information across the various regions of the brain. For those who have experienced trauma, this can potentially lead to physical changes in the brain, including the size and neural activity of the amygdala and hippocampus, reinforcing a feedback loop of stress and trauma. Some interesting research indicates that trauma may be passed down through changes to our epigenetics and is referred to as intergenerational trauma. In this hypothesis, the next generation may be born with hyperactive stress responses. Epigeneticists have seen changes to the structure and function of the brain and body resulting from trauma. There is still much research needed, and we look forward to seeing how the field of social epigenomics unfolds. Now, this all seems pretty bad, and while it isn't great, there is some good news. In the past, scientists believed the brain was fully formed by early adulthood. However, research now shows that in fact new neural pathways, and even the creation of new neurons, happens continuously throughout one's entire life. Through specific exercises, you can very literally rewire your brain, changing its structure and function. With training, you can create new ways of responding, healing your nervous system, and moving out of bottom-up processing, where we can often be at the mercy of our emotional reactivity, past pain, and trauma, and into top-down processing, where we can engage critical thinking, rationality, creativity, empathy, and compassion, taking us from a state of reactivity to thoughtful responsiveness. We do this through neuro-restorative exercises, sometimes referred to as mindfulness practices. Although mindfulness can be found in religious and spiritual practices around the world, it is not religious in and of itself. There are Christian mindfulness practices, Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, and Muslim. Our program focuses entirely on secular mindfulness practices. Merriam-Webster defines mindfulness as the ability to be aware of something that may be important, and Oxford takes this one step further and adds that this includes the inclination or willingness to do something about that which you have become aware of. Mindfulness exercises are exercises that train our brains to be more mindful, creating new neural pathways to a state of being mindful. Both awareness and acceptance play key roles in becoming a mindful human being. We must become aware of our internal and external experiences, and we must accept this without fighting it. We don't fix problems we don't think we have. We must become aware of our stress response and accept it before we can do anything to improve or control it. This is why last week we started by engaging in body scan exercises, training our neural pathways to recognize our body's response to the activation of our sympathetic nervous system. This awareness enables us to more quickly recognize this activation, as our body tells us before our brain does, via the amygdala hypothalamus activation of the autonomic nervous system. Once we have built these new neural pathways of awareness, we can then begin to build and strengthen pathways to override this instinctual response. In this class, we will be engaging in both formal and informal mindfulness or neuro-restorative exercises. You can think of formal practices like going to the gym, setting aside time to engage in specific exercises, and informal practices like choosing to take the stairs, integrating these practices into your daily life. I want to take a moment to speak about the research base that exists surrounding mindfulness interventions. This is not a hypothesis. Mindfulness has been shown in thousands of studies published in every major scientific journal around the world to change the structure and function of the brain. If mindfulness were a drug, it would have met FDA requirements 30 years ago. These exercises decrease emotional reactivity, negative rumination, mind wandering, blood pressure, heart rate, anxiety, and more. They increase focus, attention, cognitive flexibility, fear modulation, immune system function, empathy, and compassion. Mindfulness is not stress reduction, and stress reduction techniques cannot replace mindfulness exercises. It's great that you might jog or read or knit, but these activities alone will not have the effects of mindfulness training. As you can see in this graphic from a study from Harvard University on the effects of a 6-week mindfulness training course, participants showed increases in the gray matter concentration in the temporal parietal junction, posterior cingulate cortex, and cerebral venous brainstem. These areas of the brain are responsible for attention, focus, emotional regulation, awareness of self, and of others. What I find extraordinarily interesting about these findings is not necessarily the increases seen in the participants. As a practitioner, I know these things to be true. What was fascinating for me was the results of the control group seen in blue. These were a group of normal individuals with no trauma background and what was considered to be a normal amount of stress in their lives. In every case, the control group saw a decline in gray matter concentration, meaning they are losing function in these areas of the brain simply by living their regular lives. When we think about the law of entropy in physics, this begins to make sense. All systems decline over time, and the human brain is no different. Without high degrees of stress or trauma, we are still always pulled to loss of function and breakdowns. This affects both cognitive and physiological performance. If we aren't actively doing something to fight against the natural decline of function, we are losing. This is where neurorestorative exercises come in and pull us away from mediocre and low performance and towards high performance of our nervous system, improving the health and well-being of our minds and body. Each time we engage in these exercises, we are strengthening those neural pathways. The brain is like a muscle in that it responds similarly to exercises as do other muscle groups. Think of it this way. If you want to have a six-pack, you do crunches to strengthen your abdominal muscles. If you do crunches for a week and quit, you won't have a six-pack. The crunches you did in high school don't give you a six-pack when you're 40. To get a six-pack, you have to do crunches for a while to build the muscles. And to keep a six-pack, you have to continue to do these exercises. Mindfulness, or neurorestorative exercises, are exactly the same. Doing them for a week won't change your life. Doing them once a week won't work either. Research is quite clear about this. Frequency matters more than duration. If you think you can do mindfulness for 20 minutes once a week and gain the benefits, you will be sorely disappointed. I say this not to scare you away or dissuade you from trying. I tell you this to set up clear expectations. It takes time to get abs. It takes time to become mindful. Be patient with yourself. Each time you engage in the formal or informal practices, you are strengthening those neural pathways, and over time, it will become faster and easier to do. Stephen Covey, the famous professor and author, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Without mindfulness, you are in a constant and uncontrolled state of stimulus and response. Mindfulness is how we create the space necessary to gain control over our automatic reactions and free ourselves from these often unhealthy biological processes. It is truly the foundation for which our growth and freedom must be built upon. We will end today's video with a brief introduction to a focused attention mindfulness practice we call anchors. Sometimes our minds can spend too much time in the future worried about what might happen, or too much time in the past obsessing over mistakes we've made or times we've been hurt. This is driven by a part of your brain called the default mode network. Just as an anchor keeps a boat from moving too far forward or backwards, we can use our breath as an anchor for our minds. You cannot take a breath from the future nor from the past. By focusing our attention on our breath, it forces us into the present moment and out of our unhealthy thinking patterns. In this exercise, we will focus on 3 anchors to help us keep our attention on our breath. We can use words like breathing in, breathing out, or simply in, out, but we can also use physical anchors to connect us with our breath. The first anchor is your belly. Place the palm of your hand on your belly button. Close your eyes and feel the belly rise and fall with each breath. When your mind drifts away, which it will definitely, simply return to the feeling of your belly rise and fall. The second anchor is on your chest. Place your palm on your chest. Close your eyes and focus your attention on the feeling of your chest rise and fall with each breath. When your mind wanders, simply return to the feeling of your chest as it rises and falls with each breath. The final anchor is your face. Place the palm of your hand about an inch or so away from your face in front of your nose and mouth. Gently close your eyes and feel the cool air rise in through your nose and the warm air hit your hand as you slowly exhale. Cool air in, warm air out. Again, when your mind wanders, return to the physical sensation of the cool air in through your nose and the warm air hitting your hand. Now take a moment to find the anchor that worked best for you, the one you found to be the easiest to help you keep your attention on your breath, your belly, your chest, or your face. Place your hand on your anchor and bring your attention to the physical sensation of your breath. When your mind wanders, simply return to your anchor over and over again. The next time you catch yourself stuck in a loop of future anxiety or past pain, find your anchor and pull yourself into the present moment. Your mind and body will be glad you did. This week is all about focused attention practices like anchors. You can do these anytime, anywhere. And the more you do them, the easier they become. I'd like you to bring particular attention to doing these exercises when you become aware of the activation of your sympathetic nervous system. Notice how you feel both before and after. As we learn this week, the more you do anything, whether it be tying your shoes or reacting to stress, the faster and stronger the neural pathways for that action become. You have been responding the same way for a long time, and those pathways are so strong that it can feel as though there is no space between your stimulus and your response. The exercises you will be doing this week are very literally rewiring your brain. Have patience with yourself as you learn this new skill and build new neural pathways to a more mindful state of being. Your mind will wander. Everyone's does, even long-term practitioners. It's a natural part of your neurobiology, which we will discuss in greater detail next week. Each time it wanders, simply notice and return your attention to your exercise. A sustained state of mindfulness is impossible to maintain. The perfection of mindfulness practice lies in the recognition of the imperfection, seeing that you've been triggered or your mind has wandered off, and returning to your practice over and over and over again. That is the perfection. Every day brings a choice to practice stress or to practice peace. Let this week be a time where you choose to practice peace. Self-care is not an indulgence, it's a discipline.